Hey guys, how are you? I'm so happy to be back for what I can only describe as the 2.0 version of this channel and a lot of my work in general, where we're going to go over a lot of the culmination of, yes, stocks and bonds and futures and that legacy content and merging that with my a lot of my political knowledge and what I've learned and accomplished, I guess you can say, in the last couple of months during that time, and also my spiritual work for the purposes of creating cohesive solutions that are actionable and really providing broader context and better understanding that is unbiased and contextually in consideration of all aspects of discourse. And it is the best way to find truth is to find the common denominators across truths. And if we're trying to get to a goal, find also the common denominators that we need to acquire, and then the variables that have uh, prevented us from acquiring the same. And so in this video, we're going to go over the nature or the idea that capitalism, as we were taught, existed. So first and foremost, we have to establish what we mean by capitalism in a world where words are just kind of becoming lucid. I want to preface that I will describe capitalism as it was taught to me when I was in school, while I understand the definition having changed. But it is my opinion and observation that it is that definition by which we aspire, value, and the goal that of a more perfect union. And so that definition is private ownership, context to or juxtaposed government ownership, and the ability or the idea that meritocracy in the system would transpire because the value, as people value the service of one person, we would pay more or scale it or what have you. And so, in that environment or in that world, or the idea of that is that cream will rise to the top and more will do of that, and inspiration will transpire in that way. And so for that, there's three things that are getting in the way of that, and three things that are the reason why we do not have that version of capitalism, and one that pertains to private ownership of humans, presumably citizen private ownership. And the first and foremost reason why we don't have that, as you can imagine by that statement, is corporate personhood. And the reason why corporate personhood needs to be fought against. And it is from everything I've read and studied about corporate personhood. And that ruling is to basically fight it on the regards that the precedent cited does not have multinational jurisdiction, meaning that a person that unlike corporations, regular human people tend to not have a domicile or an address here on the planet. So I will circle back to that in a little bit. But the reason why corporate personhood must go if we're going to have any sovereign capitalism is because, for example, when we are discussing right now social media platforms, we're having a false discourse about their First Amendment rights, where in reality, corporations shouldn't have First Amendment rights because they are not human. And so, not only that, but we are having this false argument about the merits or how First Amendment rights are to be protected for a corporation. Whereas if you revoke corporate personhood, which is the right thing to do, um, again because it's a false ruling, not because I said so, is that then the First Amendment rights of the citizens would take precedence and not the conversation of First Amendment rights. So a corporation wouldn't even be entertained. And so another thing to consider about corporate personhood and why it's a big reason why we don't have capitalism today, as depicted or as sold to us, is because if you think about the ability to own or to accumulate wealth, you and your parents, your grandparents, the amounts of properties that they may be able to acquire during that time, and then let's say one of your grandchildren tries to sell it, well, that would happen because as humans we only can live up to, let's say 100, 120 years, base case scenario, whereas corporations can transcend the human aspect of time. And so if a corporation has been around for hundreds of years, it can go through mergers and acquisitions and buy the property from that one grandchild that decided to sell it all for whatever it was. And so you can see how then the accumulation of that um, it transpires. And so the first way to return to capitalism would be to contest and fight corporate personhood. The second reason why we do not have capitalism as sold and depicted to us is because um, the aspect or is globalism, right? And the the reality is that when we talk about capitalism or the nature of economics, we talk about supply and demand. And so the price of something will continue to go up as long as there's willing buyers, and then it will go down until and it will go down until there's zero willing sellers. Inversely, so whenever you introduce the nature of globalism, that supply and demand equilibrium is no longer there because so something that we hear a lot from, I think, a well-intended side of the aisle, but you can see the fallacy in this pretty clearly, is that there's not enough workers, so we need immigrants because people are unwilling to work. Well, in a supply and demand sovereign capitalistic world, the wages for labor would continue to go up until there's zero willing will continue to go up until there's willing participants, and will go down until the excess of willing participants uh is reduced to one or none. And so the idea that they fight for $15 an hour while simultaneously saying we should let all these illegal immigrants in becomes juxtaposed to one another, because why would anybody pay $15 an hour if someone's willing to do it for 5 or 3, and then that money's going to be exported, right? So it's not a xenophobia argument. It's not that I don't love Hispanics. I'm Hispanic myself, obviously. It's the fact that it's not conducive to taking care of your households, and just the end game here that they're trying to perpetuate. And so the third aspect of this, and the reason we don't have capitalism, is fiat currency, and more specifically, the delegation of that fiat currency. So if you think about supply and demand, and uh, willing buyers and willing sellers, there's no willing participants. There's no demand for war. There's no demand for bureaucracy. There's no demand for the inherent uh, services that Wall Street provides, or bureaucrats, or what I call the paperwork industrial complex, which is the legal system and all of that. So, but in a world where there can be a single body, right, government or otherwise, that can unilaterally be the judge, jury, and arbiter of the delegation of fiat currency, then all of those things can transpire. And so one of the conversations I was having with my dad yesterday is whether or not food should be subsidized. And my answer is no. It is not because I don't love farmers and agriculture, but rather because food is in fact something that we value. And if it is something that we value, then it shouldn't need a subsidizing, right? But the reality is that we've fallen so divergent that if it was never subsidized, we would have all grown our own food. We would have all paid attention to what is happening about the scarcity of food, or artificial scarcity, that this divergent economic system likes to talk about. And so in reality, anything's going to be subsidized, quote unquote, it would be things that have little to no demand. And so then those things would have to bear a lot more responsibility for proving that their idea, their vision, to inspire us, that what they are dishing is something that we value. And so that wouldn't enable, reckless wars and reckless spending and all of these things, because we would be a lot more attuned, because we would be principled in the natural laws of supply and demand and what we value. If we do value food, for example, we maybe would have all had our own, backyards of plants and uh, farms and what have you, and prioritize that legislation. Obviously, we are not there at that, today at that point, but that's the reason why. And so my solution is what I pitched when I first ran for office, and it's the only solution that I can see, which is to assign all of the fiat, right, to post. And what I mean by assignments, and if you guys follow me on this channel, which is a stock channel, it's exactly what it sounds like, which is basically that the banks have to post the book value of their assets in lawful money, which is gold and silver, that's a different conversation of the fact that the US dollar is not lawful money, but it's legal tender, and the difference between those two things. But that would transpire. And so in their required assignments of that, obviously they wouldn't be able to post that. The way to correlate, them having to post it in lawful money would be to maybe use something like the closing value of the gold futures contract, and then post it in that. Obviously they wouldn't have it because of fractional banking and all of those things, and so then they would be subsequently liquidated, and the margin by which they couldn't post would be burnt, so to speak, by the treasury, and then the assignment to the next set of tranches or shareholders or whatever would be assigned by the deflated value plus your own book value all the way down to the principal holder, which would be like a US citizen. And that's my cat dropping things. And so with that solution, then there would be massive deflation and the fiat system would fundamentally break. And we would once again be a sovereign nation. It's actually a pretty seamless piece of legislation that would be a one-click kind of trigger that could happen very, very quickly. And so that is my solution. And I would love to know what you think about that in the comments below. Don't feel like just because you're not running for office or because it seems from certain people's purview too big to accomplish. It's really not. I lived through watching things that I once thought were impossible conversations really become front and center discourse by in I guess in part by my incessant passion for that topic or for those topics, but also because it is in this work. I guess you see my spiritual works kind of begin to merge in this 2.0 version of my works. But it only takes one ray of light to kill the darkness, or rather the blind spots, if you're not spiritual, what have you, for more neoliberal or just general verbiage. Um, Once we become aware of the blind spot or that variable that is been consistent in why certain things don't transpire in our life or what have you, then that blind spot not only doesn't no longer exist, but then the degree by which we can permeate that becomes exponential because especially if it's been a collective blind spot. So all of this to say, like, comment, subscribe if there's something you resonate with, and share. And even if you don't share my own content, your own purview of this can have exponential change because you never know who is watching. Even if you have, one like, one viewer, that could be the precedent. Who knows, right? And so, no discourse, conversation, or engagements is too small. And so, with that said, I love you guys. I look forward to sharing a lot of my resumed works and going back to a lot of the stock conversation again and those things, as well as a lot of probably be sharing a lot of my new venture and the way this can bring us closer to closing the gap between the worlds we want to see and where we're at now. So with that said, I love you guys. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you guys on the next one.